Hello everybody, it's 7 o'clock here in the United Kingdom. You're very welcome to spend your breakfast with us here at Sky News, wherever you're watching us around the world this morning. Keep life moving is the government's new COVID slogan, and that's exactly what they hope their emergency measures contained in a new list exempting more critical workers from PINGs will do. But worry this morning from some of those on it about putting others at risk, and anger from those workers who didn't make the cut. We'll put all of that to the Environment Secretary George Eustice very shortly. Also, serves up the coolest and driest way to travel. We meet the test pilot of the board that hovers above the sea. And love it. Throwback Friday. Speak to one of the country's greatest ever performers. He's 85. Engelbert Humperdinck going back on tour. Talking to him shortly. Friday, 23rd of July. Mission critical. The government reveals its list of workers exempt from PINGs, but who's not made the cut?
Supermarkets hope the rule change will keep food on the shelves, but some unions are critical, saying that staff who are pinged are at greater risk and have good reason to self-isolate.
The final straw. Police Federation bosses launch a scathing attack on the Home Secretary after officers get a pay freeze. He's live on the programme. Final countdown, just hours until the Olympics. Opening ceremony in Tokyo gets underway.
And they're off in the rowing and the archery as Team GB start their quest to emulate the record medal hauls of recent games.
Live with the pink ship at Latitude as two acts are forced to pull out following positive COVID results in the first big festival of the government's COVID passports. We ask Grime Stars Gets what he thinks.
We're going left one day, we're going right, and I'm questioning everything at the moment because it just doesn't make sense how we're handling things.
And the extreme heat warning remains in place for Northern Ireland. All the weather details coming up shortly.
Hello, everybody. It is Friday, end of the week, and a list we can tell you that reveals what the government views as mission critical. The news that thousands of double-jabbed workers in sectors, including food supply chains and other key industries, will soon be exempt from the dreaded PING. It's been received with mixed emotions, concerns from some of those on it, such as NHS workers, that they may put patients at risk, while those left off it are angry and frustrated. So who is on the list and who is exempt? Well, have a look at this. The measures cover 16 industry sectors, including food supplies, essential transport, emergency services, and also the energy industry. To avoid self-isolation after being pinged, workers will have to do these things. A negative daily test. They also have to be double jabbed. And their firms have to have approved on a case-by-case basis. So basically, the firms have to apply to the government and they have to be approved on a case-by-case basis. There'll be around 10,000 food distribution workers included in the scheme, we're told. Priority sites from today will be food distribution centres for supermarkets before the scheme goes more widely available next week, as Shingi Maruriki reports.
For a select few, the pingdemic is nearly over. People working in 16 sectors, including food distributors, doctors, delivery drivers and emergency services, will soon be exempt from self-isolation. But some frontline workers have concerns about the scheme. At this hospital, they've seen firsthand the damage COVID-19 can cause, and they don't want to take risks.
It's my responsibility to protect someone and protect myself and my children as well and my own family, rather than exposing myself to more vulnerable people and you get more infected and then share it to your family. It's not fair. You're working hard to keep them safe, not to give them disease.
I would like to protect my colleagues and the people that I work with. I would like to protect the people that I actually face with. Yes, I will have to.
The government may have finally published its small list of people exempt from self-isolation, but with 600,000 people pinged by the Track and Trace app, this is far from the end of the debate about the policy, not just for key workers here, but for people earning a living in a number of other sectors too.
For other people whose businesses have been left off the list completely, the future could be bleak. Paul is a chef in Liverpool. He's worried his kitchen will be brought to a standstill while COVID cases continue to rise and staff are forced to stay at home.
If you're going to leave us off an exemption list and you're going to leave us to the perils of pings, then we need a support package that remains in place to protect us from this sort of loss.
Not everyone is disappointed with the news, though.
I think it's a good move, and I think it's good for the customers as well. And it will keep us all a lot safer, and also for the people that aren't fully vaccinated, like myself, will be less at risk.
With scenes like this beginning to raise alarm bells, the government had to do something. But it may not be enough to stop some sectors slowing to a standstill. Shingi Mayarike, Sky News.
Very different to this time yesterday, isn't it? Let's call it fluid, the situation. Talking about it in more detail, Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs is with us, George Eustice. Hello to you.
Good morning.
Yesterday it wasn't a big problem. Today, how big a problem is it?
Well, look, we've been working closely with the food industry, both the manufacturers and the retailers over the last week or so, monitoring the situation closely, looking at indices such as late deliveries to individual stores and absence levels. And the industry had some concerns at the end of last week, but we've been keeping it under close review. What's clear is that early this week, those absence levels got to about 15, in some cases 20%. And that's why we decided to act swiftly to make sure that the food supply chain can continue to function normally.
How many people are going to be exempt from having to isolate if they're pinged?
Well, under the scheme that we've put forward now for the food sector, we've identified close to 500 key sites. That includes around 170 supermarket depots and then another couple of hundred key manufacturers like our bread manufacturers, dairy companies and so on. And all of the people working in those key strategic sites, distribution depots and those manufacturing facilities will be able to use this scheme. And it's probably well over 10,000 people.
Yeah, see, the thing is, when the Minister was sitting there yesterday, he was giving me the impression that I was overreacting by saying that there was a problem.
Well, I think he was right in the sense that there wasn't a problem, in that we had some stress starting to come on the system, but we were working closely with industry, and it was really during the course of yesterday, having had further discussions with them, seeing that absence rates had increased to a level that was starting to concern us, and that it was likely now to continue to increase a bit further. It was that decided the situation, and we acted swiftly. You know, we're never going to take risks with our food supply, and that's why we've acted in the way we have.
A lot of red tape still, though, isn't there? I mean, people have to apply to be exempt, don't they? It's not as straightforward as just saying, OK, you can come in if you've been pinged.
Well, there's two separate schemes. So we have one for the food. Of course. And I know these things can seem complicated. So for sectors like the nuclear power industry, the rail network, the water industry, where you have a small number of highly skilled professionals that you need to ensure can come to work, we're having an exemption for them as well, where they, but it's quite a narrow exemption. For the food sector, it's very different. This is quite a big exemption.
So they don't need to apply?
They don't need to apply, but we are working with all of those food companies. We've identified the 500 sites. The sites will be designated, and then they'll be able to operate this at a site level.
Yeah, you see, the thing is the hospitality sector is not included, is it? It's been one of the hardest hits throughout the pandemic. Could they potentially, going forward, be added to the list?
Well, look, obviously, for everyone, in the middle of August, we intend to move to a different system.
Yeah, but for now?
For now, I think not, no. So we are obviously keeping everything under review. The reason we've made a special exception for food is for very obvious reasons. We need to make sure that we maintain our food supply. We will never take risks with our food supply. When it comes to other sectors, yes, of course, the fact that they are also carrying high absence levels is causing some stress for them, and it's making it more difficult. But you also have to bear in mind why we're doing this, and we are trying to still just dampen the pace and the velocity at which this infection is spreading, because we have to keep a very close eye on those hospitalisations. We know that if people are double jabbed, then between 92 and 96% reduction in hospitalisations is what we can expect. But there will still be some hospitalisations and sadly still some deaths. And we just need to make sure that we don't have this growing too quickly. And that's the aim of this.
So it could get worse before it gets better, is what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
it is likely to, because hospitalisations do follow the, the infection rate by 2 to 3 weeks. And so that's why we're doing this. I know it's frustrating for everybody, but we do want to try to just dampen the curve of this infection until it turns and things start to go in the other direction. And then, of course, we can move to a different system for everyone.
OK, given that it could get worse before it gets better, is the military on standby?
We don't have any need or plans at the moment to use the military, but of course they're always on standby. We always have that option to call on the contingency that the MOD always have in place for situations, but we don't need that at the moment.
Well, given things change so quickly, I mean, as I said, the Minister sitting there yesterday, a very different story to what we're getting from you today. It would be foolhardy not to have them on standby, wouldn't it?
They're always on standby. We have a standing part of the army that is always there should it need to be called on. We never know, for instance, when we're going to have a major flood incident that might affect us. And in those situations, we regularly have troops that are on standby that can be called on at the drop of a hat. That's a standard procedure in government.
And the 16th of August was the date when people who are double jabbed don't have to self-isolate if they've been pinged. The previous Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, of course, would be Prime Minister, is saying that that should be brought forward.
Well, look, I know people are saying these things. I'd understand the case, and obviously we've adopted a different approach already in the context of the food sector, which we've announced, and we've done that expeditiously, quickly, because it's needed to be done in that way. We're keeping everything, obviously, under review all of the time, but the reason we're maintaining the current system of test and track and isolate is that we know that if someone's been in contact with somebody who's tested positive, who's infectious, they are 5 times more likely to pick up the virus themselves. That then contributes significantly to the spread of the virus. So we're doing this to try to dampen the spread so that we can keep that peak in hospitalisations at the lowest possible level.
So it could come forward?
Well, at the moment, it's not coming forward. So we are...
Could it be extended further?
Well, we've got a clear plan, and until we are...
Because you work on data, not dates, don't you?
We do work on data, not dates, and the key test for us is really the point at which things start to turn, and we are confident that we are past the peak in infections, and then we can anticipate the peak in hospitalisations to come some weeks after that.
I understand, but you know, you've been a hostage to fortune when it's come to dates previously, and you've had to move them here and there. Is it a fool's errand to set dates?
Well, I think people want to have a clear idea of where they stand, and the reason we have set that date, and of course, things can always change in either direction. But the reason we set these dates is to give people some kind of indication about what they can expect, and that's why the Prime Minister set out his route map to get out of the lockdown. He was clear that he wanted each step to be irreversible, but we would take each step with a degree of caution. And until we can see really this rise in the infection level off and start to dip downwards, it would be premature to prevent and to depart from the approach that we've got.
Where are we with vaccine passports?
Well, we've made clear this week that when it comes to the younger people who want to attend nightclubs, we're going to make it a requirement from the end of September that they would need effectively to be double jabbed in order to go into those venues. Those venues are much higher risk. Obviously, they're very crowded. We think actually there is a case.
So are football terraces, though?
Yes, well, in some...
We saw what happened with the football, with England-Scotland game. That there were super spreaders who were here and then caught it and went back up to Scotland.
Well, look, we're looking... There's a range of different approaches you can have. You can have testing arrangements so that people have to test before they go to those venues, so that you don't have people with the infection and the virus going into those. The double jabbing is always obviously an option. We don't want to use it more than we need to. The Prime Minister has been very clear, for instance, that we definitely want to avoid using it in pubs and so on. But as we chart...
terraces?
Well, as we chart our way out of this, we can't rule anything out, but I know that the government set out earlier this week some of the types of situations where it could be used. So
but there's no clarity on that, and of course we're around the corner from the football season. What's the thought?
Well, then we're talking about major events, big conferences. Those are but mainly indoor ones. Those are the types of situations. Well, theatres, it is a possibility, and I know theatres themselves are actually looking for an option that's going to enable them to start to open with a degree of confidence. So they want that ability to be able to open with confidence, and it's something that we are considering.
What about Tory party conference?
Well, as I say, it could be that business conferences, including possibly party conferences, where you have large numbers of people indoors, there could be a case for it there. We haven't ruled that out, but we are, as I say, working through this. We haven't made final decisions.
Some of your backbenchers said, don't you dare, if you do that, we are not coming to party conference. What would you say to them?
Well, look, party conference is still some way away, and at the moment, we're very much focused on trying to get this current infection to level off, watching it very closely, making sure we keep hospitalisations down. We may be able to refine the approach, have different decisions as we go through later in the autumn. We'll be able to review things then in light of how the situation's developing.
But you'd rather go for the safety of the many than the stubbornness of the few?
Look, we want to have the option to be able to do the right thing based on the evidence we have when we're there and what the prevalence of the virus is. It's very difficult to predict exactly where it'll be. We've got a high degree of confidence that we've severed the link between infection and hospitalisation, but it's been reduced by about 95%. There's still a residual risk there. That's why we still need to show a little bit of caution. But, we are confident that we're going to be able to keep that hospitalisation down and return to life closer to normal. But we may still need to have certain tools at our disposal, and we shouldn't take them off the table.
Does that include wearing a mask? Because you told me you didn't want to.
Well, I don't want to wear a mask, no, but I am still, I can tell you, wearing a mask on trains and in crowded areas. And I think it's a courteous thing to do if you go to a shop and they are asking you to wear a mask and have that on the door. Of course, you should do the right thing and continue to wear it. I'd love to get to the time when we no longer have to wear masks. I find them very uncomfortable. But while they still perform a function in dampening the spread of the virus, and while people are asking me to do it on trains and in shops, I'll continue to.
Another couple of things while we've got you. The Police Federation has no confidence in the Home Secretary. Do you?
Of course I do, yes. I work very closely with Priti, and I've got great confidence. And if you look at what she's done on policing, we've seen the recruitment of an extra 8,000 police officers. We've seen an increase in the budget for the police.
We're playing with those figures. I'm not going to go into the figures today because, as you know, you cut 21,000, but yeah.
But she's, under her watch, we've been increasing police numbers, and it's also the case that she's taken action to make sure the police have got the powers that they need to do their job and to remove some of the frustration. So I think she's doing a fine job as Home Secretary.
OK, but if the NFU, for example, said they want you to go, would you go?
Well, I probably wouldn't if I thought I was doing the job right. My view on these things is...
So let's ignore the unions.
Well, look, you in this role in politics, whatever job you're in, you will get a degree of criticism. There will be things that you have to do that may well be the right thing to do, but aren't always popular with everyone. That's part of the course. It goes with the territory.
You never thought for a second, though, when you agreed to go into politics to serve for the greater good, that you'd have to deal with what you've had to deal with over the last 18 months, did you?
Well, it's been an extraordinary 18 months, but for the whole country. So, yes, of course. Huge pressure on our political system and on government, huge responsibility to try to get this right. But also, let's bear in mind, it's been a much bigger trauma for the NHS who've had to cope with this, all those key workers, all those businesses that have struggled as well. Sure. That is where our main concern is, because they've been the most affected.
We're out of time. Just want to ask you about the Rugby World Cup. Australia and New Zealand have said they are not coming. They've been referred to as cowards by rugby league people here. I'm not sure if you're a rugby league fan. You're probably more a rugby union fan, I'm guessing. But what are your thoughts about them not coming?
Well, I think it is a choice for them. So I wouldn't use that type of language. But at the same time, we do want to try to move back to life as normal.
Should they reconsider?
Well, I hope that they might, but I'm not going to second-guess a decision that they make. Every country in the world is having to make difficult decisions based on their own circumstances. We've had to take decisions that not every other country in the world would have liked, but we're all wrestling with this difficult situation.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well for the cricket and the test and things.
No, and obviously,
Ashes,
with the European Cup and everything, we've tried to facilitate those sporting events to try and ensure that things can try to get back to normal. So, I think it's disappointing, but it is ultimately a decision for them.
OK, you're going to get me in trouble if you don't go, so I better let you go. Thank you very much for joining us, as always. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you want to catch up on any of our interviews here on the programme or watch the programme when you're out and about this morning, then you can. You can find us on the mobile app or go to our website and go into our live blog to watch the programme live. And you can catch up on the interviews on my Twitter as well, at Kay Burley, or you can watch the programme at Sky News on Twitter. Milena is standing by for us in Watford this morning. You saw right at the top of the programme talking about shop workers and who's exempt, who isn't. Milena, good morning to you. What's the situation where you are at Asda in Watford this morning?
Good morning, Kay. Well, 10,000 workers in the food supply chain industry will no longer have to self-isolate when they're either pinged or contacted by Test and Trace. If they take daily COVID tests and test negative, providing that happens, they can still continue going to work. Now, that doesn't apply to shop workers on the shop floor, like in the supermarket behind me. It's rather people who are packing the food, who are loading the food onto lorries, and crucially, lorry drivers, of whom there's already a shortage. So the pilot starts today with 15 depots. It's going to spread out to about 500 sites in the next few weeks. And it was, of course, prompted by that record number of pings sent by the NHS app, over 600,000 in the week to July the 14th. And that was even before all of the restrictions had fallen off. So you can only imagine that the number after July the 19th will probably be even greater. And many of those people who were pinged were critical supply chain workers. That has caused shortages in some supermarkets. It worried the government because no one wants to see the repeat of what we've seen at the beginning of the pandemic, when some shortages really caused panic buying among people. Not everyone is happy, however. Unions are saying that this policy doesn't protect workers. It exposes them to coronavirus. It works for bosses, but not necessarily for employers.
OK, Milena, thank you. Looking at what's happening as far as the front pages are concerned this morning, how are they looking at today's story? And the Eye is leading on the news that the rules on who must isolate after being pinged are to be changed to keep the economy on track. The Mail says there's increasing pressure from business for these changes, and many top firms have signed a letter from the paper to that end. One MP has called for the army to be brought in to make sure there are no shortages in the supermarkets. That's on the front of the Metro. That was actually, we spoke to the Minister about that, and he said that is definitely still on the table. Cover of the Telegraph, a study has found that sending school children home after they come into contact with a COVID case is unnecessary, and that daily testing would be just as effective. Still to come throughout the course of the programme, 25 to 8, joined by the National Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, John Apter, who says a pay freeze for the police is the final straw. Also be getting reaction to that story from Labour when I speak to the Shadow Minister for Policing and the Fire Service, that's Sarah Jones, 7:45. And speaking to two executives in the food and drink business about the recent coronavirus pandemic that's left the industry struggling due to staff shortages. That's at 8:05. Last year, the pandemic wiped out the UK's music festival programme. Today, Latitude gets underway. I'm sure you've heard of it. The first festival since most lockdown restrictions were lifted. Our entertainment reporter, Claire Gregory, is at the festival. She's with us now. Hi, Claire. Very good morning. Are they all set?
Morning. Yeah, well, I think the only people really that are set at the moment is the famous pink sheep, who you might be able to see just over there, little pink blobs. They're kind of up and about this morning. All the campers seemingly still fast asleep in bed, perhaps enjoying the sight a little bit too much last night. Let me show you over here. You'll be able to see one of the stages where acts will be performing this weekend. That's called the Lake Stage for obvious reasons. You can actually get in the water and have a dip if that took your fancy. A little bit cold here this morning for that, I must say. Now, this is one of the government's test events, which means people have had to prove that show certain proofs in order to get onto site. We asked some people what they'd had to do in order to get here.
So we done a rapid test at home yesterday, which we had to upload to the NHS app, and we took a screenshot. And then when we got to the reception tent up there, we had to show the screenshot to get our wristbands.
I'm in the high priority group and quite vulnerable, so actually for me something like this makes me feel much safer.
Oh, it's a bit surreal. Like, this is my first overnight festival anyway, so the whole experience is a bit crazy, but it's so fun, like having a great time.
And of course, those tests have meant there has been some disappointment. We've seen Acts Fontaines DC and Alfie Templeman having to pull out after getting positive COVID tests. We know that there'll be government passports from September, which means the venues will require double vaccination in order for people to come into nightclubs and things like that. It's not something that all artists support. Eric Clapton has spoken out against it. And the grime star Getz told us it's not something that he can support either.
For me, I'm very much confused. I'm very much with the nation. I don't understand how things are being run. A lot of things don't make sense to me. We're going left one day, we're going right, and I'm questioning everything at the moment because it just doesn't make sense how we're handling things. I think the government's doing a terrible job at the moment.
But for the 40,000 people that are on this site, they are looking forward to seeing some live music across this weekend, along with those famous pink sheep.
OK, for now, thank you. Thanks a lot. We'll be back at Latitude throughout the course of the morning. If you're going and you're really looking forward to us, why don't you send us a tweet at Kay Burley at Sky News and let us know what you're most looking forward to. Now, we've got a real treat for you later on the programme. Before I tell you who it is, tell me which side of the fence do you sit for these two greats? Well, this morning, just for this morning, we're backing the hump. And the great man himself, Engelbert Humperdinck, will be joining us on the programme 9:45 to talk about his forthcoming tour, going on tour again at 85. He's got more energy than me. Now, the number of 20 to 29-year-olds in England who have coronavirus is at the highest rate ever recorded. Public Health England have stated that more than 1 in 100 people in that age bracket tested positive for COVID last week. Research by the University of Oxford has found that daily testing of students and school staff may be just as effective in cutting transmission of COVID-19 as isolating whole groups. They say changing the system could reduce absences by 39%.
First of all, there's not much transmission from children in the school environment. And the second really reassuring thing is that lateral flow tests, which people had some doubts about, clearly are quite good at picking up the infectious people and protecting the school from children who might otherwise be infectious.
Well, let's take a look at the latest daily COVID-19 data. Almost 40,000 new cases of coronavirus were reported in the latest 24-hour period. 84 more deaths have been recorded. It takes the total number of people who've died within 28 days of a positive test to almost 129,000. More than 45,000 first doses of COVID jab were given in the same period and 183,000 second doses. 36.5 million total second doses, fully vaccinated people in the UK. There was a lot of concern about this story when I went to bed last night. 5 people have been hit by a car outside a pub in South Wales. Police say one person has life-changing injuries after the crash in Pontyclun, with 4 others in hospital. The 79-year-old driver of the vehicle is also in a critical condition. He thought he had a medical episode just before the accident. Joe Biden's imposed fresh sanctions on Cuba over alleged human rights abuses during protests on the island. A Cuban security minister is among those penalised. Thousands of people took to the streets of Havana to protest about food shortages and high prices. I've been talking all week, haven't I, about people dying while visiting the beach or the coast in the last 10 days. That figure is now up to 9 here in the United Kingdom. Coast Guards urging people to take extra care during this hot spell. We're going to be talking about the impact of the hot weather on the elderly as well later on the programme. What's we got planned for the next few days? Joe's standing by in the weather garden for us. Joe, good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, yes, the heat goes on, particularly for Northern Ireland. There's still an amber warning there for extreme heat today. But for the rest of the weekend, we're looking at heavy thundery showers.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning to you. Well, it's a bit of a different picture for many this morning. It's rather cloudy over eastern parts. There's some mist and fog around, but the heat continues in the north and the west. And as I say, there's a big change to come tonight as well. But for today, still some sunshine around. Once that cloud has burnt back, the mist and fog has gone. Rather more hazy than it has been, and temperatures typically mid to late 20s rather than tipping over into those 30s. A little bit cooler through those eastern parts, even when the cloud burns back. And as I say, extreme heat continuing for Northern Ireland, could see their highest temperature ever. But this evening, the winds start to pick up in the southwest. And as they do, we could see some coastal gales. So we've just talked about danger in the water. Certainly not very good conditions if you're in small craft, people on holiday camping. Really, those strong winds coming as quite a shock. And with those strong winds, also some heavy thundery showers, which will be tracking their way northwards into parts of South Wales and central southern England by first thing tomorrow morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, I know that many of you are still trying to look on the bright side despite the intense heat. Check out this interesting alteration to a roadside sign in Northern Ireland. Usually says 30 miles an hour, as you can see. It's been changed in Ballywhitcock to the temperature recorded in Northern Ireland yesterday in centigrade, 31.2 degrees. Very funny. Love it. Now, here's a slam dunk story for a group of teenage basketball players. The under-15s and under-16s teams of Bantry in County Cork in Ireland were looking for a new sponsor. And look who they have managed to land. American supermodel Emily Ratajkowski, I think that's how I pronounce it. She'll be supporting them all next season, and her logo will be featured on the boys' jersey. Emily has tweeted saying she has family ingrained in the Bantry area. The boys are said to be on fire about their new sponsor. I bet they are. Probably looking forward to her visiting potentially as well. Let me tell you about the Environment Secretary. He's told us on the show this morning that the hospitality industry will not be included in the scheme to allow some key workers to avoid self-isolation. And the military are on standby should things get worse. Here's what he told us.
Obviously, for everyone, in the middle of August, we intend to move to a different system.
Yeah, but for now?
For now, I think not, no. So we are obviously keeping everything under review. The reason we've made a special exception for food is for very obvious reasons. We need to make sure that we maintain our food supply. We will never take risks with our food supply.
Joe's with us this morning. Good morning to you. Thoughts on what the Minister had to say?
Lots of fascinating lines, including on the military, Kay, saying there's no need for them now, but they are on standby. Some senior Conservatives have suggested getting them involved. On exemptions, these two schemes being announced pretty hurriedly last night, but him not saying that hospitality was on any list yet. So many people in that sector are really desperate to get an exemption because they don't think their businesses are necessarily viable with so many staff off. On vaccine passports, we know they're coming into effect in nightclubs, but what about theatres? He said that was possible. They may also be in effect for party conferences. Some Conservatives have already said they will not go to their own party conference if they have to. And also, more generally, on a lot of these restrictions, including bringing forward that key August the 16th date, he said that there's no plans to, but it is sort of possible as well. So everything
seems
seems
to be move further back as well. They won't tie to that.
Yeah,
date.
either way it could move. He seemed to basically say, you know, this is what we're doing today, but things could change in the future.
They've been a hostage to fortune on dates, haven't they? I'm surprised they keep giving us dates, but
Yeah,
they go with the
indeed.
date and not the dates, don't they,
That's what he used to
apparently?
say,
That's what
yeah.
they tell us. And he's not going to wear a mask, even though... Well, he is going to wear a mask, but he told us he wasn't going to wear a mask.
He doesn't enjoy wearing
No.
masks, Kay, but he's still wearing one even without enjoying. He's like the feeling of it, he said.
No, for now. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Some events may have already started, but the delayed 2020 Tokyo Olympics officially gets underway today with the opening ceremony. Organisers say the scale-back event will be solemn, with the lighting of the torch taking place in front of an empty stadium because of coronavirus restrictions. Tom Parmenter is in Tokyo for us. He's covering events throughout the Games. Hello to you, Tom. When we say an empty stadium, there'll be a few people there, but not noticeably so.
No, about 950 people in a stadium that can hold 68,000. So be drastically different. A few VIPs there. Jill Biden, the First Lady, on her first overseas solo tour, and also the French President Emmanuel Macron. And it will be very different. You remember, of course, London 2012, the opening ceremony there. What a moment that was when all the scepticism just melted away and we saw a spectacular performance directed by Danny Boyle that just captured the story of the United Kingdom. And Japan has got to try and do something similar in very difficult circumstances, far more difficult than London or Rio faced. This is Tokyo's moment to try and show that they can put on the Games and do it in a way that's never been done before. So all eyes of the world, some 4 billion people apparently will be watching the Games, and the Japanese Prime Minister here saying that if we can show everyone that it works, if we can show that this great celebration of human endeavour can be pulled off, then he sees great value in doing that.
OK, early success for GB?
Yes, we're still in early stages, but the rowing and the archery is underway today, and Vicky Thornley in the single sculls cruised through her first heat quite easily. She's from St Asaph up in North Wales, lives in Henley-on-Thames, so that she's close to a river. But yeah, she cruised past her first heat with 3 seconds to spare over a Swiss rower who was in second place. So a solid start, but lots of rowing to come over the course of the weekend. And then in archery, the archers always like to get in first, and perhaps a bit of a throwback to battles of centuries past. The archers firing the first arrows of a battle, and we've seen them in action today. Among them, Naomi Folkard. She is someone who waited in the UK until the very last minute because she's been breastfeeding her 5-month-old daughter and has been expressing milk to try and leave her stock at home while she's out here in the Games. So all sorts of difficult decisions with families and friends not being here to share those moments in the Games, and so many people, of course, watching back home and just willing their athletes, friends, relatives on to perhaps a medal, who knows.
OK, have the locals, though, been able to buy in to the mood of the Games? Because we have seen some concerns that the people of Japan are concerned that COVID is being brought into their nation.
Yeah, it's mixed. I mean, some people are very excited that the Games are here finally and just will be watched on TV, of course, and other people very sceptical and say that it will bring inevitably more cases. We've seen the COVID numbers go up overnight again, the biggest number of cases amongst those Games participants, everyone who's come into Japan, tens of thousands of them, to take part in the Games in some way. And yeah, let's introduce you to Mr. Takashima. He's a guy who takes supporting the Olympics to whole new levels. He's been to every game since 2006. He'd bought 197 tickets for events at these Games. £30,000 later he is now, and he can't go to any of them. This is what he told us.
What hurts the most is the time and passion I poured into securing these tickets, not the money. And it breaks my heart that we cannot watch the Games live in person. Yesterday, I was watching the opening game for the softball match on TV, but something was missing, as I've experienced the liveliness and the touching moments which can only be felt in person. It's not the same watching it on TV.
So the Games start proper, or certainly the opening ceremony starts today. How's your Japanese going, Tom?
It's not bad. Are you feeling waku yet, Kay?
I don't know, am I? Tell me.
It's the Japanese for excited, one of the words that we've been learning out here. And a lot of people, as we say, are quite sceptical. The opening ceremony, by the way, will be starting at noon UK time if you are looking to tune in. And yeah, we've been picking up a few words of Japanese along the way. Ohayo gozaimasu is good morning, and apologies to any Japanese viewers, perhaps for my pronunciations, but watashi wa Tom desu is hello, my name is Tom. So we're getting there with the Japanese, but all eyes on that huge spectacle tonight. It could be great. It could be the moment that Japan really moves out of the shadows of the controversies that have dogged the Olympics so far, or it could be the start of another unknown chapter. We'll just have to wait and see.
OK, sayonara, Tom. We'll see you in the next hour. Thank you. Apparently, how low you bend when you are bowing to someone in Japan gives you an idea of where they are on the scale of status. So obviously, when I'm bowing for Tom, I go really low down. Tom reporting for us live every day from the Olympics. So tune in at 7:30 and 9:30 for Tom in Tokyo. Now, the announcement that despite their work during the pandemic, police officers would not be given a pay increase has been described by the Police Federation of England and Wales as the final straw. What does that look like? What does it mean? The Federation's national chair, John Apter, is with us. Hello to you, Mr. Apter. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. So, final straws, what are you going to do?
Well, we've made quite a bold decision, Kay. We've announced that we have no confidence, first of all, in the Home Secretary, which is a bit of a statement, and this is on behalf of 130,000 police officers across England and Wales, but also the pay mechanism, the so-called independent pay mechanism that we have. It's simply not fit for purpose. We have no confidence in it at all. So we've walked away from that because no matter what evidence we put in there, or indeed police and crime commissioners or chief constables, the government just decide what's going to happen, irrelevant of what the evidence actually is. So the pay system, the pay body, which calls itself independent, has its hands tied. So the whole system needs overhauling. And I think when the decision was made by the Home Secretary not to give a pay award, despite everything that policing and my colleagues have been through over the 18 months, and you and I have spoken about this, Kay, you know, they've been spat at, they've been abused, they've been vilified, they've been driving ambulances, they've been working in hospitals. They really have stepped up. And I know for some, you know, supporting the police is not a popular thing, but my colleagues deserve to have the very best support they can, other than warm words from this government. And to have not a pay increase, whilst others in the public sector, rightly so, I would add, that, you know, their ministers have stepped up and supported them very publicly and got them that rise, then why shouldn't we? Yeah. So we've had to make that stand. And I'm also, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I get that. And, you know, I have a lot of good friends who are police officers, and I completely understand the challenges that the Thin Blue Line is facing at the moment. But you know, no confidence in your minister is a big shout. It's a great headline. But what does it actually mean in practice?
Well, first of all, it puts the Home Secretary on notice that, you know, we're not messing about. This is a serious issue, and certainly I'm really proud to be a police officer, and I'm incredibly proud to be in this role, being the voice of my colleagues. And we met as a national body yesterday, an urgent meeting, and we were unanimous in our decision going forward. We just feel that because of our unique status, so police officers are not employees. Police officers have very limited rights. We are not a union. We're a staff association, and I get so much criticism from my colleagues for why aren't you doing X, Y, and Z? The reality is we don't have the power. We believe that that's been taken advantage of, and it should be the opposite. There should be a recognition that police officers are unique. They're in a position where they can't withdraw labour. They can't do certain things as other employees can. So we need to, I would call on the Home Secretary now, in the wake of this warning shot, to review the decision on the pay award, to revisit it, because what we'd asked for was a 3% increase across the board. That would cost the public purse in the region of about £138 million. I know that is a lot of money, but in the whole scheme of what we spent during COVID, what we spend on public salaries, it's a drop in the ocean, Kay. 1% would be less than £50 million.
No,
so it is affordable.
I understand, but I suppose my point is, you've said that you have no faith in her, but how much teeth does the Federation have? You've just illustrated really there that you don't have very many when it comes to actually taking any action. And in fact, the Federation, not you personally, I'm sure, but the Federation previously said similar things about Jackie Smith when Labour was in power. But there's not really that much you can do. They're empty words, aren't they?
Well, no, they're not empty words, but there is a frustration that, you know, on behalf of my colleagues, I do the best I can. My colleagues, the local Federation branches around the country do the best they can. Believe me, Kay, a vote of no confidence in the sitting Home Secretary is a big deal. It is a big deal. It will be felt.
To whom? Is it a big deal? Because she won't care.
Well, I've not spoken with the Home Secretary. You wouldn't be surprised to know. But if she doesn't care, then that says a lot. But I would imagine that this has been felt very clearly in the Home Office and in wider government. And this is about me saying, look, let's talk about this now. Let's move forward constructively. But my colleagues are really fed up of just having a pat on the head and you're doing a great job, but that doesn't put food on the table or that doesn't pay their mortgage.
Okay,
we have more officers now.
Okay, well, to further underline my point, I don't know if you heard the government representative on the show this morning, a little bit earlier on, and he was saying, well, he has complete faith in the Home Secretary and the work that she's doing.
I'm sure he would, because that'll be his script. Look, I'm not going to pick fights with other ministers. It doesn't surprise me. I expect many others will come out and give their support. I don't speak for them. I speak for 130,000 police officers who are looking for the Home Secretary for leadership and tangible support. Tangible support. This pay announcement has been devastating. Let's not forget, this comes off the back of the vaccine announcement, where my colleagues were put at risk, but they weren't prioritised for the vaccine. So this is a culmination of things, Kay, and things need to improve drastically.
OK, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it, as always. Thank you. Let's put some of those thoughts to the Shadow Police Minister, should we? Police and Fire Service, I should say. Sarah Jones with us now. Hello to you, Sarah. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. You've just heard what the Federation have had to say. You know, my question is, what teeth does it have that they have no confidence, no faith in the Home Secretary? What do you think?
Well, this is incredibly sad. And as John Apter said, he represents 130,000 police officers. And I think this really is the kind of the pay rise issue was the straw that broke the camel's back. The police officers throughout the last 18 months have been on the front line. We had PPE shortages at the start of COVID. We had lack of information about what was going to be implemented in terms of emergency laws and how the police were going to implement that. And we saw the police bearing the brunt of blame over some decisions that were made by government. The vaccine programme, the Home Secretary didn't push for our police officers, our frontline police officers, to be vaccinated. And now to have a 0% pay rise, which is obviously a real terms cut, is really the final straw. And I think they're just so deeply frustrated that, you know, I went to the Police Federation annual conference and there was Boris Johnson and there was Priti Patel, you know, saying how much they supported the police officers. But of course, they don't put their money where their mouth is. They don't actually back them when it comes down to it. And we have a demoralised police workforce who want support from their government.
OK. Neither did the Federation when it came to Jackie Smith when she was the Labour Home Secretary.
Absolutely, you're right. The Police Federation has a deep and rocky relationship with many Home Secretaries. But what they had an argument with Jackie Smith about was about a 2.5% increase. We're now talking about a 0% increase on the back of an exhausted workforce who've been cut over the last 10 years to the point.
Yeah, with all due respect, she didn't have to deal with the pandemic, did she?
Well, before the pandemic, our police service had been cut back to the absolute core. We'd had pay freezes for years. We've had 21,000 officers cut. We now have 9 in 10 crimes, 9 in 10 crimes do not lead even to a prosecution. I mean, we do have a system where people are not safe, crime is not being tackled, and we have a Home Secretary who's not supporting and not backing the police. And I mean, we said she should look at her position when she was found to have broken the ministerial code for bullying. She has a litany of errors that she's made since she became Home Secretary. But, you know, the buck stops with the Prime Minister on this one.
OK, so are you asking... Sorry, Sarah, we've got a lot to get through. Are you asking for the Home Secretary to step down this morning?
We're saying she needs to consider her position. Of course she does. And we said that when she broke the ministerial code.
What does that mean? That's politics speak.
I think it means, at what point do government ministers make a decision based on the errors that they've made, the lack of support that they've made, breaking the ministerial code, that they should consider their position? Absolutely. And a 0% pay rise for police is the straw that broke the camel's back for the Police Federation. They don't have support in her. I would question her position based on the fact that she broke the ministerial code.
So you're saying that she should resign or be sacked by the Prime Minister? One of the two, is that what you're saying?
I think the Prime Minister needs to consider what he does, and the Home Secretary needs to consider her position. I think we've got to the point where really there has been so many errors, so little support for the police, and so much lack of tackling the big crimes that are facing us now, whether that's rape or fraud or online crime. Really, the government hasn't acted, and I think the Prime Minister.
So why don't you just say it then? Why don't you just say she either needs to resign or get sacked by the PM?
Well, that's what I'm not trying to create a headline. I'm trying to describe.
No, I'm not asking you to. You're saying consider your position. So what are you saying? Consider your position. She either resigns or the Prime Minister sacks her. Is that what Labour's position is this morning? It's pretty straightforward.
I agree with you. Those are the things that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary need to consider. She also needs to put in place a proper pay rise for our police. She shouldn't have written a letter to the pay review body that said, I don't want you to consider a pay rise. The most important thing is we do support our police. Whoever is in charge, we support our police and we tackle crime.
OK, I'm still not clear. Are you asking for her to resign this morning?
I think she needs to consider her position, yeah, definitely.
What does that mean?
Well, that means she does. We said she needed to consider her position many months ago when she broke the ministerial code.
So she needs to resign this morning. The Labour's position is that the Home Secretary needs to resign today or needs to be sacked by the Prime Minister. Is that a correct interpretation of what you're saying?
Labour's position is yes, she needs to consider her position, absolutely. And I'd like to hear from her as to how she's going to try and, if she's not, how she's going to try and fix some of these issues of this very punitive 0% pay rise.
Thank you for clarifying.
And how she can support the police.
OK, thank you for clarifying that. Talk to me about where we are with the exemptions to being pinged. What's Labour's position on that this morning? Is that the right thing to do?
Well, I think we've got two issues, haven't we? And I heard your interview with George Eustice. One is getting control of the virus so that people aren't going to be pinged so much. And one is getting control of the message. And getting control of the virus means we should have, we shouldn't have rode back on the wearing of masks, on people working from home. We do need to look at our sick pay and isolation pay. We do need to look at ventilation in schools. There's a whole raft of measures that the government should be implementing urgently. And on getting control of the message, we've had absolute chaos this week. First of all, we were told by ministers that they weren't going to be publishing a list of potential areas that might be exempt. Then we did get a list. We don't know on that list sort of what the basis is. Is this legal basis? Is this guidance? Is this how on earth is it going to be operated? Because you have to have a letter from the government department with a named person in order for them to be exempt. And businesses have to contact government. So how is that going to work? The admin is going to be a nightmare. We have a different system with the NHS workers. We have a different system now announced today on food and how we're going to make sure people can get to work if they work in the food sector. So I think there's confusion and there's a lot of questions to answer. The government does need to act. We don't disagree with that. But this chaos where we have the social care sector saying, well, does this apply to us? We don't know. How is that going to work? We have so many answers on the last day of term before everybody breaks up.
What we do know is at this stage, the hospitality sector is not going to be included. Should they be?
I think we have too many questions to know who else should be included and who else shouldn't. The government need to be really clear what this means, because the guidance on the website says this is for a very small number of workers who are essential, who are critically important, or there might be a risk to national security. And it says you have to have a letter from government with your name on it before you are exempt. But then we have these other systems in the food sector. It's very confusing. Businesses don't need more bureaucracy. They need to be able to operate as simply as possible. But the government needs to get on top of the virus, because that's why we're in this mess.
Well, and they would say that's what they're doing. The other thing that was clear from my conversation with the minister that you heard was that the military is on standby, as they always are. What sort of message does that send to shoppers who are going to Asda if there's somebody in uniform delivering toilet rolls?
Well, I don't think we're at that point yet, and I think the government needs to get a grip of this problem and get a grip of the message and get a grip of the infection rates so that we can not get to a point where we have to bring the military in. I worked on the Olympics, and I remember well when we brought the military in to support us in the Olympics, and it was quite extraordinary. We're not at that point, but the government need to get a grip so that we're not, because I don't think businesses feel secure. I don't think people feel safe. I think people are worried about there not being enough restrictions in place, and people are all anxious about, are they going to be able to go on holiday, what's going to happen over the summer, and are we going to see a resurgence back in the autumn of infections rising again? The government need to get
We've got 40 seconds. We've got 40 seconds left on the programme. Just remind me today what Labour's position is on vaccine passports as opposed to yesterday or tomorrow.
So on vaccine passports, I think we have a classic case of the government kite flying ideas in the media, seeing how they land without any answers. There are two really important questions. The first one is you can't have a vaccine passport that is just based on whether you have the
We've got
vaccine.
20 seconds left on the programme. Is Labour in favour of vaccine passports?
If it was a blanket passport just based on whether you'd been vaccinated or not, and therefore excluded all the people that couldn't get the vaccine, no, we wouldn't. If it was a sensible system based on testing, then we would look at it. But we need to see the detail.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you. Come on to the programme next time in person. Great to see you.